Our next panel is panel number 3, the Holocaust and Contemporary Holocaust Studies in Ukraine. It is my pleasure to hand over the virtual microphone to our chair and discussant for this panel. It is Natalya Lazar, who is program manager in the Initiative for Ukrainian Jewish Shared History at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So Natalya, welcome, and looking forward to the panel that you're hosting.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, everyone on the East Coast, and доброго дня всім нашим колегам, які
And
подоєдналися.
hello, all the colleagues who have joined from Ukraine.
Natalya Lazar, and my title recently has changed. I'm a program officer at the Jack Joseph Morton Mundell Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the USHMM in Washington, D.C. It is my great pleasure today to moderate, and I encourage our audience to put your questions either directly into chat box to me, and I'll make sure that we will voice your questions to our presenters. Our first presenter today is Dr. Yuriy Skira, who is joining us from Lviv. Yuriy Skira is known to many colleagues. He holds a PhD in history from Ivan Kripikevich Institute of Ukrainian Studies of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Currently, he is a senior research fellow at the Ecumenical Studies at the Ukrainian Catholic Universities. And you probably know him from his work and publications, Poklikany, and his second book that came out just recently last year. It's titled Solid. And today, Yuriy will talk a little bit about his most recent research. Yuriy, the floor is yours.
Дуже дякую, вітаю всіх колеги.
Thank you so much. Hello, dear colleagues. Today, my speech will be about the issues about the Footwear Factory Solid. So the name of my speech, Hiding Jews by the Monks of the Studite Rule of the Footwear Factory Solid in 1943-44. So instantly, let me tell that we are dealing here with the footwear factory in the middle of Lviv, and during the war, the monks of the Studite order were actively helping the Jews. What I will tell you now is the part of my research, which was published recently. This is my monography, Solid, the Footwear Factory of Life. So speaking about these footwear factory of life, about Solid, we are speaking about the enterprise which was closer to Rynok Square at Tribunalska Street. In modern Lviv, it's Shevska Street 16. Of course, they do not have any factory there. They have a restaurant at the ground floor, and 2 other floors have the hotel. So this factory is interesting. Why is it interesting? Because it is very rich with really sources. We can see different people here, and we can have different researchers when we are following this factory's activities. The first person we are meeting was incredibly important for this factory was Johann Peters, the monk, who was German by origin. In 1930s, he came to Галичина. He felt this vocation to become the monk of the Studite Rule. And what's interesting, he in fact was really close to Metropolitan Andriy Sheptytsky. In 1939, Metropolitan Andriy Sheptytsky sent Peters from Lviv before the beginning of the war to the Western Europe with such a task: to save the traditions, to preserve the traditions of Studite Rule, and when there is such an opportunity, to come back. In 1941, there is such an opportunity. Peters is coming back to Lviv, but he is coming back as a different functionary. He has a different role in comparison with what he used to have. He used to be the monk, but now he comes to Lviv as a civilian, and he does not confess to the local authorities that he used to be a monk. So the Metropolitan Andriy Sheptytsky gives him delicate assignments, sensitive ones about properties, because he had to restore the property of the Greek Catholic Church, at least to take something which used to be confiscated. In the end of 1941, Johann Peters invents the idea that they could found the enterprise which would create footwear. This is how the Solid factory emerged. He found partners who would help him, and we can see that at these factories there are lots of different people. There are the monks of Studite Rule, there are civilians, and there is a separate category who are the employees who are coming from Lviv ghetto. And we can see that all of those people are working at the factory, and this breakthrough moment is 1942. In 1942, in Lviv, in August, a so-called big strike takes place. And during that, Johann Peter, together with the Studite monks who were working at the enterprise, they decide that they need to save the employees who could die. And they are not only saving the employees, they're also inviting the members of their families to the factory. So we can see that these people begin to hide in the basements of this factory. This is the first stage, a very important stage, because this is the first stage in the process of hiding people in the factory. But on the other hand, from different sources, we can see this was the most massive stage. If it is the most massive, we don't have the list of the people. We need to remember about that. But we have the witnesses' words and statements that it was about 24 of people who were hiding in the basements of this factory. A very interesting point is the end of 1942, when Jon Peters was arrested, and the factory, in fact, is getting to the different hands, Gorditsky. But still, it goes on acting, and they still hide people. But after it's been closed, they decided to send those people, scatter them all over different locations within Lviv. And in 1943, 1945, they hid mm, uh, one family, Fink family. This is the Lviv family, which was living in Lviv, used to live there. They were from Lviv originally. They knew the technical director of the Solid factory, Mr. Kaczmarski. He brought them there. They were in good relations with Studites. And in 1944, the Studites were taking care of them. The Fink family is very important for the understanding of the history of the factory, but not only. It is important because these people in 1963 gave an incredibly big statement to Yad Vashem, what really happened with them, about their experience, about the challenges they faced, about the people who helped them, and different aspects. So when we are reading these statements, in my opinion, it's just fantastic out of what it includes. We can see totally different sides of life. We can see that the people who were helping them in the process of the war were changing their roles. They used to be criminals or maybe the helpers, and we can see even gray roles when we cannot finally understand what role they chose. But on the other hand, we can see a very big degree of readiness to help. But what's very important, we can also see really bright moments when the people were not ready to help. And this is the environment among the Studites and so on, the Studite Rule. So again, let me emphasize, this source is fantastic because it allows to see different perspectives, to see different strategies of behavior and different choices of people which were inherent for the Studite Rule or who had something to do with the factory. So in 1943, they came there, they came with their children, the Fink families, when we can see the whole history of the family, and the monks of Studite Rule separate them. The children should be hidden separately. Two girls, they were hidden by the nuns of Studite Rule. And let me emphasize again, this is a very interesting story with the nuns, because finally we can see the story of the nuns of Studite Rule, which was not that well obvious, because in the sources, if we can see, there is a huge attention to Olena Vitor, who was the head of the nuns, but somehow we do not see the simple executors of that. That's interesting. And elderly people, the adults, I might say, Fike and Abram Fink, who are hiding at the factory. Sometimes they were taken out of the factory, but then they were brought back. And we can see those complications which they face. And what's very interesting, the technology, how they hid them. Well, speaking technology, I would say
Про
the
зв'язок.
techniques, not technology, about the electrical warning system, the bell that you need to hide, or how the premises were equipped, and so on. So the people who were hiding them, their psychological and emotional state, we can see those different points. And that was really nice, because before that I found the statement from the church about the people. And here we can see them from a different side, from the perspective of the people whom they helped. So it's rather interesting. It's a kind of, it looks really full. When I say full, I mean that when I see other cases of the Studite Rule saving people, we do not see such a full picture there. It is well saturated with different perspectives. And the end of the story of Solid Footwear Factory is the end of 1944, when the German occupation was over, and we could see that the Studites have the certain process of help to the people to enter this world, when to reintegrate into the open world. We can see how they help them with food or with any other products, any points, so how it happened in the end of the process, when it's not over, but it's almost over. So the story of Solid Footwear Factory is incredibly interesting. This is almost the end of my speech. The story was a bit of a duel. The Fink families family, I lost them connection with them in the beginning of the 50s. I don't know what happened with them. They moved from Wrocław to Israel. As for Jan Peters, that is really dramatic, because he has become a victim of the internal church intrigues and other bad things, but in fact he died in 1995 as a Catholic priest, as a retired priest. So it was nice to meet with many people who knew him personally, because 1995 is not that long ago. And the story of Solid Footwear Factory would be interesting for us, because we can see the ones who were rescuers, we can see the people who were hidden, we can see their different strategies of behavior, their statement, we can see different challenges which they were facing, and we can see the steps, how they were having this shift, really very lively descriptions of these events. It's very interesting, and this is the fullest picture of only one location which was ruled by the Studite Rule, how it was living and how it happened. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Yuriy.
Thank you so much. You finished in time. Нагадую нашій аудиторії, що якщо
Let
ви
me
маєте
remind our audience, if you've got any questions, please send them to the chat and we will definitely voice them.
is Petro Dolhanov. Petro is joining us from Rivne. Petro holds PhD in history. His research interest focusing on interwar and wartime economic policies. Today, Petro will present a case study, which was the largest study of the project. It's a microhistory of Jewish community in the town of Ratne in Volhynia. We also know Petro Dolhanov as an editor of a special section, Overcoming the Past. This section is completely dedicated to the Holocaust history in Ukraine and is being published by Ukrainian journal Ukraina Moderna. Petro Dolhanov is also known for his work in the non-governmental section, specifically the work of Mnemonica, that is based again in Rivne. And today, Petro, the floor is yours and you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. I want to express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference. It's a great pleasure to be here and to provide speech to present one of my recent results of one of my recent research, the Holocaust in Ratne County or Ratne region. To be honest, I didn't know how to indicate it in English, because in Ukrainian it is called rayon, But it's the same region, oblast, also in Ukrainian. So we are talking about Ratne region and implementation and features and social dynamics of the Holocaust there. I would start from broader information that the results of this research is a part of a circle of publications that were recently presented and were recently uploaded to the website of Ukrainian Center for Holocaust Studies. This is a circle of publication, in particular 6 publications on the history of Holocaust in different Volhynian towns, small towns, in which I was involved. I was involved in writing them. Only Message is a co-author publication with Roman Mikhalchuk. Other publications, they were written, it's my studies, and you can find them in a free access. They are available in a free access on the website of Ukrainian Center for Holocaust Studies. Regarding the theme of my today research, it's Ratne. Ratne in interwar period, it's one of the small towns in Volhynia region, where the Jews composed over 50% of the population, and where Jewish life were flourished. In Ratne, most Jews were Hasidic or Orthodox, and they have a lot of activities related to the Zionist movement. And also Bund organization was presented there. So in this small town where over in 1937 over 2,000 Jews lived, they had different political movements, and they held different social economic activities. In particular, the major directions of these activities are agriculture, small trade, and also artisan. A lot of Jews were artisans, and as recall Mikhailo Polonetsky, Jewish survivor from Ratne, he recounted that his family owned 2 cows, tended to 15 hectares vegetable garden, and had a hayloft. His mother Ita managed this farm, while his father Einach worked as a shoemaker, and Einach returned home only on Friday evenings and attend the synagogue on Saturdays and Sundays. He would once more head to the villages to sew shoes. And this Jewish life, the life of Jewish community, was interrupted when Second World War beginning, and it started for the Ratne Jews in 1939, with when so-called First Soviets came to the region. First Soviets, it's Perші Совєти, as most locals recall the regime, Soviet regime that intervened into the area and united Volhynia to the Soviet Ukraine and Soviet Union. And there were a lot of changes in the Jewish life within this change. The social structure of the town underwent significant change because it was impossible to lead your own business under the Soviet regime. They nationalized most such enterprises. They nationalized a lot of property, private property. They started to create collective farms, and also harsh measures were imposed to eliminate the diversity of political parties and social movements. There were also a lot of measures against religious activities. In particular, the number of services in the synagogue and other public religion activities of Jews decreased. The same related to the other religious activities. Orthodox or church, they were also closed. And but most Jewish survivors, they recall this period and from the perspective of after the war, from the perspective of Holocaust, and they often indicated that there were relatively tolerable conditions under the Soviet occupation, according to the Jewish testimonies who survived the Holocaust. Of course, in comparison with the Nazi occupation, Soviet occupation often were designated as tolerable. And the beginning of the Holocaust is the invasion of German army to the territory of Soviet Union, and everything. The German army, after the invasion, didn't stay for a long time at the area. They advanced through the front line, and the first event related to the further Holocaust events in Ratne, this is the pogrom, so-called pogrom, that happened on 6 July 1941 and was organized by local population. There are different views and discussion on who organized this pogrom, or even was it organized or just like up-down event that was unorganized and spontaneous. Because in some Jewish testimonies we can find clues that it was unorganized, in others, in particular in criminal files, we can find some surnames of people who were involved in these pogroms, that they were also auxiliary servants of auxiliary police, that at the same time was set up in Ratne. And some of participants of this pogrom, they were pertain to OUN, Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and some of them even further gonna be soldiers of Ukrainian Insurgent Army. But at that time, at this particular time, most of them there is no clues that they were involved in nationalist activities. And the character of the pogrom, it was a robbery of Jewish property. It was again in contrast to their own instructions. And from this fact, we can conclude that even though some of the participants of this pogrom were related to OUN, it was it was spontaneous, and people were interested in robbery of Jewish property. The next day after this pogrom, only one Jew was killed during this pogrom, and he was killed. The reason might be that he tried to protect himself from the intruders, and protecting himself from the intruders, he he killed one of them, and as a revenge, they decided to kill him. And the next day after the pogrom, the first shooting of Jews, 7 July 1941, happened. 27 Ratne Jews and 33 Soviet prisoners of war were shot close to the Polish cemetery. And in July 1941, auxiliary police unit was established, composed of 30 auxiliary policemen in Ratne, and there were some units in the countryside in other villages. And some discriminatory measures against Jews were imposed against the Jewish population. For example, Star of David and Star of David armband. The Jewish people were forced to wear Star of David armband, which was changed since the 6th of September 1941. And a curfew was imposed, and for Jews it was longer than for other non-Jewish population. And Nazi occupation regime, under the Nazi war occupation regime, started to create forced labor camps in the area and started to confiscate Jewish property. The next stage of the Holocaust, it's a persecution of Ratne Jews under the civil occupation regime. Civil occupation regime was set up in Ratne since the beginning of September 1941. And Ratne became a part of Gebit Kovel, which included in the Volyn and Podolia region. And from autumn 1941, 3 German gendarmes were stationed in Ratne, and the auxiliary police unit was subordinated to these gendarmes. There were other anti-Jewish measures in Ratne at this period, and there were discriminatory policy, and Jews used the forced labor for doing manual job. And the major other stage of the Holocaust process in this region, it's creating ghettos. Ghettoization in Gebit Kovel started in May 1942. It's very important to realize, because ghettoization and then liquidation, process of liquidation of the ghettos, they were held under the Gebit within each Gebit of the region. Gebit commissars, in cooperation with the police units, police detachments, they made major decision when the ghettos that existed on their area would gonna be liquidated. And ghettos in Gebit Kovel were created in May 1942. And the shooting of 112 Jews were held also in this period in Ratne Ghetto. It was a response to the partisan attack. Soviet partisans attacked in that period one German unit, and they, in response, it was in common to kill, to shoot civil population, in particular Jews. And the liquidation of Ratne Ghetto happened in 24-25 August 1942. About 1.5 Jews from Ratne and surrounding districts were among the victims. And the cycle of ghetto liquidations in Gebit Kovel lasted from the second half of August to the first half of September 1942. The shooting were carried out by the detachment of the security police and the SD from Kovel, and they were assisted by auxiliary police officers from Ratne and surrounding villages. It is also known that the Matseyev mobile battalion of the auxiliary police, number 103, could have participated in the shootings. In criminal cases, I found some examples on and some information on this. Several dozens of men from the village of Prohid were forced to dig a hole because the shooting were held close to the village Prohid. It is near Ratne. And most Ratne Jews were killed in these dates, 24-25 August 1942. Here we can see the memorial on the road near to this site. This is a previous memorial I will show in the last slide. The current memorial that was built 10 years ago. And about 500 Jews managed to survive this period. And most of them were also killed within the next days or weeks. And most of them were killed on so-called Zabolotska street in Ratne. They were revealed by German police and auxiliary police detachments who were involved in hunting, so-called process of hunting of Jews. And immediately after the shooting of Jews, their stuff that was remained was looted, and this looting and sale of Jewish property of murdered Jews, was held under the control of local civil organization, civil administration, composed from local population as well as an auxiliary police. And after the execution, many policemen appropriated Jewish property. It was in common in different areas that policemen were one of the first in this chain of appropriating Jewish property of killed Jews. And the rest of the victims' property were confiscated in favor of the Reich, and these items were taken to the district board's warehouse. And subsequently, this stuff was sold to local residents for a low value, and the money that the occupation regime got selling Jewish property, they were sent to Germany and used in waging war, in the process of waging war. It's also a process that was in common to the same in different areas of occupied Europe occupied by the Nazi, but there were some differences in local level, of course. And the testimonies of surviving Jews also contain references to the establishment of artisan training courses in Ratne for the Christian population, because a lot of Jews, they composed majority amongst artisans, and there were a gap, lack of artisans after liquidation of the ghetto, and Nazi regime organized these courses to provide for Christian populations this opportunity to integrate in this sphere instead of Jews, instead of killed Jews.
Petro,
And
sorry, but your time is up.
okay,
So
and
you can
the
drop
last
the
one states liquidation of the labor camps. 3 labor camps were liquidated within Ratne area, and after this, after February 17, 1943, no Jew was able legally live in Ratne area, and there was a period of surviving, so-called period of hunting for the Jews, and so some Jews who managed to survive, to escape before this action was provided, they built different strategies of survival. And this process was very hard. Most Jews of Ratne region, they built such strategies of surviving, joining the ranks of Soviet partisans or asking for their protection, forming spontaneous survival groups in the forest, and hiding in prepared dugouts. And auxiliary police officers seems to have played a key role in the identification and murder of the surviving Jews in Ratne in 1942-1944. In this stage, it was a stage when auxiliary police played a major role in killing Jews. And this picture is very iconic. It's not from Ratne. So Andriy Usach found it in SBU archive, and we used it within our recent exhibition that we presented in Rivne Regional Museum, how our policemen, gendarmes, German gendarmes with Ukrainian auxiliary policemen, they leading a group of revealed Jews, maybe to shooting. It's Katerinivka, Katerinburg, Ternopil region, but it's Volyn area. And I would say that the hunt for Jewish survivors organized by the Germans and the auxiliary police clashes with Soviet partisans who also were prone to kill Jews, and the Ukrainian insurgent army. Some units of it also were prone to kill Jews, but there were other cases who tried to help, trying to help. It's a complicated and discussive issue, and peasants who reveal the survivors' hiding places, these are the factors that contributed to an extremely low survival rate in the occupation territory, because even about few dozens of Jews only remained on the area, Ratne area, and returned to Ratne after the liberation of this area by Soviet army, or after the second occupation, it would be right to say, of this area by the Soviet army. And
Thank you.
most
Thank
of
you.
them moved.
Petro, thank you. We have to move. We have two more speakers. I'm really sorry. We'll try to make sure that you will draw your conclusions during the Q&A, but I'm sorry I have to stop you. Our next presenter is Dr. Serhiy Hirik, who is a senior researcher at the State Research Institute of Encyclopedia Press and a senior lecturer at the Jewish Studies program at the National University of Kyiv Mohila Academy. There, he teaches courses on the history of Ukrainian Jews and the history of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. Dr. Hirik works on topics concerned with political history of Ukrainian Jews, especially on the fate of the Jewish leftist political parties in Ukraine during the period immediately after the First World War. Dr. Hirik also researches the politics of memory in post-Soviet states, as well as the features of contemporary anti-Semitic propaganda and Holocaust denial. Since 2020, he is a Vice President of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies. Serhiy, the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes, 1-5. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. I will give my talk in Ukrainian. So, зараз вмикаю собі таймер.
Let me switch on the timer in order to make sure that I'm complying with the time slots. Good. Let me switch on my presentation and we'll move on. Hopefully you can see my presentation. Yes. Yes, we can hear the presentation. We can see the presentation, sorry. So this is the topic for my speech today, and it's all about the topic of Holocaust and how it's being used in the contemporary Russian far-right music culture performers. But what I have to say is that this topic of Holocaust is not only presented in neo-Nazi performers, but also it's being used by other performers who are not quite the far-right music culture representatives. In anti-Semitism and the topic of Holocaust, it's manifested in the lyrics of numerous far-right musical groups in many countries. It could be from Western Europe as well, but we're not going to talk about this. Let me focus primarily on the Russian examples. So, should we take the kind of Russian culture, the topic of Holocaust in the far-right music culture, it's kind of a secondary one, because they're primarily focusing on the other topics, like kind of a denial of Christianity. It could be racism in the actual forums for Russia, like calls against migrants from Caucasus, from Southern Caucasus primarily, or from the Central Asia. There's also calls against the representatives of different ethnic groups of the Russian Federation, but not in the central Russian regions. So the topic of Holocaust is I would say it plays a secondary role, except for one example, that's a musical group Arcanum Greek. It's inactive right now, although it was fairly popular in the beginning of 2000s, but then it stopped. And the topic of anti-Semitism came into the Russian rock music somewhere in the end of 1970s, but I wouldn't call the performer as a far radical. It was a musical group, and as we can see from the latest interview, it is more of a satirical song. So you don't need to, consider that seriously. Even though many would seem very serious about the topic of this song.
Ну і абсолютно інакше, і власне Летов не згадував.
Totally different. Yegor Letov never mentioned Holocaust in his songs, but the totally different situation is from the mid of 1990s when we have a Russian ghetto, Ruskaya Ghetto band, which emerged in 1994, and then it was renamed into Kolovrat. How the neo-Nazis say Koloborot. They don't want to use the Slavic form Kolovrat. This is the name of the swastika. Not to use this word, the Russian neo-Nazi used the phrase Kolovrat as the replacement for the word swastika. Kolovrat, the topic of Holocaust, presented as just praising Holocaust. They did not deny it, but they are, well, this is how they look like. Formally, they've never been disassembled, but still they don't have concerts since 2014. Denis Gerasimov created this band. You can see him to the left.
Того, як виглядає
And those are the examples how they praise Holocaust in the texts of this band. Heroes of Roa is very famous. Slavs fought in the SS units too for the purity of Aryan blood. Now they are sleeping beyond the skyline, but they will rise again to fight only if you call them. So those elements devoted to the Jewish topic, they explain the situation during the World War II, when the Vlasov's army was created, and the end of World War II. In the last phrase, they write like the red terror with a Jewish face, then in 1945 turned the flames to smoke. And for instance, what's interesting, in the same song, Heroes of ROA, they equalize Jews and Masons. So they just disseminate the idea of Jewish Mason conspiracy. White brothers, now we are all together in the decisive battle against the Masonic plague. Another song, I Hate the Communists. It was not in any studio albums, so it's not that easy to find the proper date. Other songs can be found by the albums. The explanation of the reasons of World War II is here. So, as you can see, criminal Stalinism unleashed a fraternal war. So the responsibility of Stalin is in that. So tens of millions of lives were lost in this slaughter. That's what they mean. And the Jews it's useful for the Jews, according to the opinion of the authors of these lyrics. And also this topic was presented in the song Liberal. This is the song from the right-hand era, the Nazi symbol with the right hand. This is the song of 2005. The Aryans attack again more than a half a century later to destroy forever their Masonic dominion. Forgetting nothing, forgiving no one, we will prove white supremacy by fire and sword. Or another interpretation of the history of Holocaust and its glorification, Punisher SS Varyag, the album of National Revolution, one of the first albums, 1998. Hitler sought to liberate Russia from the dictatorship of the Bolsheviks. He wanted to destroy the Zionist nastiness they find such rhymes to demonize everything connected with Jews. By the power of German bayonets, the Reichswehr and the Slavs fought together. Why Reichswehr? Because the word Wehrmacht couldn't be named here in the lyrics. Against the Masonic plague. The Masons somehow emerge here. The Vikings did not hide from death in a trench. They went chest deep in bullets and targets in the shooting gallery, so that after the victory in Eastern Europe, the Jewish vampire would have fallen everywhere. We remember the exploits of the Second World War, where the great nations slaughtered the Jews. The unknown soldier paid with his head, and fratricide mowed the ranks. So lots of anti-Semite templates and just cliches are united in these lyrics to demonize the Jews as much as possible. Then there are jokes about gas chambers with the threats about future genocide. This is the satirical, the skinhead song. I was walking along the field, waving my scythe around. I chopped a Jewish rabbi to pieces. The Zionists are in a panic. The motherland will be cleansed. They see gas chambers at night. Then another lyric, Glory to Russia. That is the main song of the album, Glory to Russia in 2001. Here I would see several lyrics connected with the Jews. Again, they appeal for the future Holocaust, they excuse Hitler, and they praise Holocaust. In fact, another example is the blend Arcanum Krieg. Here they have instantly separate forms, denial of Holocaust, as in the song Holocaust, and you can see it here, that the example of that, they sing about Shoah. So Holocaust is the eighth wonder of the world, so we can see that on our entrance of our world. And the same band, Arcanum Krieg, has the song Gas Chamber. They don't deny Holocaust, vice versa, they praise it and glorify that. And they say that the gas chambers will emerge again. First, they describe the situation, how they look first, and then the time will pass and we'll hear the legs of those again, the future victims of the gas chambers. Everything will repeat, the shouts, the silence, the scared faces, and the smoke of the gas. We'll move to Mr. Kharchikov a bit later because I'm out of time already. Okay, let's move to Mr. Kharchikov. I will not speak about TNF, True National Front. Holocaust is the topic for them, which is in the tertiary topic, in the topics of I will not speak about that. Kharchikov is a very famous person who died last year. He positioned himself as a leftist, neo-Stalinist bard. However, he is a very awful Russian Empire fan, and in his lyrics, we can see how anti-Semitism and denial of Holocaust, not glorification, but denial of Holocaust, and Ukrainophobia and Georgiaphobia and other forms of xenophobia. He has the Ukrainophobic song, "Why You Ukrainians Need a Black Sea Fleet," and so on. He has the song Holocaust, and in fact there he ridicules the topic of Holocaust. And again, we have this issue of Holocaust. I never heard about this word before, but now we have guests in the Kremlin and they say that their people have suffered a lot. So then he denies Holocaust and ridicules it. I don't remember Jews to be suffering. We did not see their trenches under Moscow, but they helped the fifth channels, and Hitler tortured them as well. He said that Hitler did not kill the Jews. He only was, in fact, robbing them. So he has lots of lyrics about this topic. And also anti-Semitism in his song Stalinist Repressions, where he says that there were repressions of Stalin against the enemies of the people, and then He denies Holocaust with the following words in the same song, Holocaust. We don't see any silence on the world. This Holocaust doesn't let us sleep. That's an interesting issue. So we have excessive tears. How can't we cry if the Jews were offended? They were brought to the shootings and they were going there. And those who fled, they were burnt in the furnace. That's what he says, that the Holocaust was just invented, for instance, in the song I Cannot, I Cannot. I can see different examples of different singers and those who are now scowling about their fiction heroes and fictitious Holocaust. He denies pogroms in Russian Empire. He has the songs which is devoted to that. And then he uses the classical excuse of anti-Semites that he is for Jews, but he is against Żyd. He says they are shameful, like the rats along this world. They are the origin of Zionism. They are in the evil. So Jews, please get away from Żyd. Well, no comments. And I have only a minute left. The end of my speech is with the band which is not neo-Nazi, but it is absurd. It parodies Nazi slogans and makes them absurd. I have only 1 minute, so let me tell a couple of words about this band. The soloist of this band had a pseudonym Ksenia Hitler. So this band was the most active, and it still exists, but it was most active, and their most interesting songs were since the beginning and middle of 2000s till the middle of 2010s. And for instance, there is the phrase about denial of Holocaust in the song Orthodox Cannibal. That Orthodox cannibal doesn't know a sin, he doesn't wear leather, he brings the children to the kindergarten, and he does not deny the Holocaust. So between those, yes, this is the end of my time. Okay. So between two songs in one album, they have a phrase which is not the part of the song. Holocaust did not exist, but it will definitely exist in the future. So one of their albums has the name The Future Holocaust. They parody lots of anti-Semitic slogans and expressions. All of that is with obscene words, but all of that is so absurd that it becomes even funny. So all of this band is rather popular in different groups among Russian opposition and among the leftists and among the anti-Semites who understand that they are not serious about their expressions, but they still like the lyrics and the style, because this band, as the majority of neo-Nazi bands, is thrash metal. Its aesthetics is really similar to the neo-Nazi ones. Thank you.
Our next, last but not least, speaker is Dr. Vitaly Chernoivanenko. Dr. Chernoivanenko holds a PhD degree in history. He's a senior research fellow at the Judaica Department of the Institute of Manuscript at the Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine. He also serves as a president of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies and is currently a chief editor of Judaica Ukrainica. Dr. Chernoivanenko taught Jewish history and religion at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy for more than 12 years. He also served as a visiting professor at the University of Montreal, Indiana University, and most recently at the University of Toronto, where he was a non-resident scholar. His research interests include biblical interpretation, Second Temple Judaism, Dead Sea Scrolls, homoerotism in Jewish religion and culture, and also the history of Jewish-Ukrainian and Israeli-Ukrainian relations. Today, Dr. Chernoivanenko will speak to us about image and representation of the Holocaust in Ukrainians and world's philately. Vitaly, the floor is yours. 15 minutes.
Thank you so much, Natalya. Can you hear me? Я подумав, якщо колеги виступали українською мовою,
So
я
if my colleagues were speaking in Ukrainian, I will be speak Ukrainian as well, especially under the conditions when I'm short of time. It will just save my time if I speak Ukrainian. So, but not that quickly. Still, I have 15 minutes, right? 15 minutes are mine. Okay. Thank you. Then let me instantly open my presentation. And thank you, the organizers of this conference. Do you see my presentation? Not so far. Yes, now we see it. And let me make it full screen. Do you see it full screen? Nope. Not so far. But we can see the slides. But you can see the slides, but you don't see them full screen. No. It's not full screen, then a moment. Okay, and now, yes. It is working. Natalya, Serhiy, do you see it full screen? Yes. Thank you, dear colleagues. So, thank you again, Natalya, for the presentation and introduction words of my topic. Of course, I could speak about that, and my power bank is working for one lecture for an hour at least, or maybe an hour and a half. But during 15 minutes, I can only conduct a short review of the selected material. I'm working with this topic. If you know, I recently started to work and to unite my scientific Jewish studies with my personal, in fact, hobby of philately, which led to scientific studies of philately. So I narrowed down this topic to the Holocaust, taking the materials which I had before, and I was working for this conference, finding other interesting materials. So on the one hand, I'll try to demonstrate and illustrate a certain, let me emphasize, only selective material for this topic with at least short analysis and characteristics about this material. Let me instantly tell you that the geography of philately, and in particular about Jewish studies and topics, and the Holocaust in particular, is rather broad. So let me instantly mention that philatelic objects are, first of all, the postal stamps. The second category is the envelope. The envelopes or FDC first day cover. They can be marked, they can be cancelled, they can be postmarked, they can be of different category. First day cover, FDC, is the classical one. So this is the envelope which has a certain stamp, and there is a certain postmark or cancellation. So then we say that this cover or envelope was cancelled or postmarked. The speaker instantly interprets himself into English. Okay, so this is the first day cover or the cover of a certain occasion. And very often the another category, which is important for the philatelic society, though some of them consider it's a separate point for collection, this is the maximum cards collection. When they have the postcard, a similar phenomenon for FDC, but instead of the envelope, they have a postcard, and it has a stamp on it. The image on the postcard has to be correspondent to the image on the postcard, and there is a cancellation or the postmark. Now, closer to the topic and the geography of Holocaust in philately, Ukrainian and world one. Let me tell you instantly that under the conditions of several minutes which I got, I thought before the presentation what I should leave aside and skip. And a huge part of philately is the philately of North America and United States of America. So, if you are interested you can, in fact, visit a philatelic memorial of the Holocaust, which was initiated in the end of the first decade of the current century in 2009. Also, you can visit the American Philatelic Society, which founded the project of the Holocaust Stamps Project, and they created an exhibition of a philatelic memorial of the Holocaust. So lots of materials were implemented by American society. They have multitude of materials, so we took it from the collection of the society. So different institutions are taking part in that process, in particular, the institution which our discussant and moderator represents, Natalya, that is the Memorial Museum of Holocaust in the United States in Washington. Let me illustrate one stamp of this country, which is, I would say, the most famous and the most illustrative and symbolic. We can see the stamp, which was issued in 1995. It was devoted to the events of 1945. That is about the liberation of, in fact, Holocaust survivors from different camps, in particular Auschwitz. We can see that allies, as an inscription, allies liberate Holocaust survivors.
So this is the stamp from the American countries. Now I would like to go to the Ukrainian stamps for just 5 minutes, and then we'll have the final 5 minutes to talk about the global stamps all around the world. So just to cover the Ukraine, the first ever stamp on the topic of Holocaust was published in 1991, so the independence was already proclaimed, but we didn't have any national stamps. We can see some inscriptions, and what was written, there's no Jews there, just as it was those no Jews in the public kind of domain during the Soviet times, and you can see me moving the cursor, right? Okay, good. So you can see the inscriptions here, the 50 years of the tragedy in Babi Yar, and this is the Soviet movement, and then to the memory of the victims of fascism. Once again, there's no mentioning of the Jews and no mentioning of the Holocaust. There's, you can see, they were truly used in the post office. They were sent. And this is Soviet historic educational center Babin Yar, and you can see the address of this center as well. So this envelope was truly used. This is also a rare part of my collection. There's a blue stamp as well, kind of additional one as well. Then in Ukraine, we have at least 2 releases of the stamps dedicated to the Holocaust. These are official one, because there's a project called Own Stamp, when the person can can order their own stamps. There's a couple of releases dedicated to the Babin Yar tragedy. So the first stamp was dedicated to the 70th anniversary of the Babin Yar tragedy. Then to the right we can see, or to the left in fact, we can see a whole piece, and I just keep explaining that one stamp is not always properly explaining, the whole kind of event, because the whole piece, you can see it clearly defines the kind of the art, the painting they were trying to resemble. So that is a special envelope particularly designated to the Holocaust. And this is the second issue already dedicated to the Baba Yar. That's 5 years later, that of 2016. That's to the 75th anniversary of the Baba Yar. So this is how they've printed the Baba Yar, the pain of the Ukrainian soil. This is what it was called. And that is the envelope with the official stamp. And it wasn't printed in many copies, and it has already only the inscriptions in Ukrainian. Now the Ukrainian post office is writing everything in Ukrainian and English. Now there was an official also stamp dedicated to Tatiana Marcus. She's a well-known person who were tortured, and there's a monument in Baba Yar dedicated to Tatiana Marcus. So official, this is the official stamp with an envelope, and Tatiana, in case of Tatiana Marcus, she's only in the capital city. So like in Washington, D.C., we have our own capital. So there has to be the official issue of the stamp, and it's being released in the capital city. And if the person is like certain famous person in certain region, then they're trying to issue also that stamp official in the other area as well. And the official issue of the stamp, the second one was in Sumy region, because now we have a different situation. As in case of the stamps of different countries, there's issues dedicated to the Jews and the Holocaust, and non-Jews as well. The non-Jews, those who saved the Jews during the Second World War and during the Holocaust. And in 2021, Ukraine has adopted an official document, and every year in May, they are mourning the day or recognizing the memory of those people who saved or rescued Jews during the Holocaust. And there was a lot of people like that. But what they've issued, only this thing, well, this is the official issue of the first day. Well, there was no official release of the stamp, and there was no official release of the envelope. There's just a special kind of seal or issuing stamp, and it means that a person can take anything and they can put this seal on this envelope. And well, someone took the envelope with the birth of Taras Shevchenko, and they've used this official stamp in this way. Others took the envelope of Ukrainian post office, and then they've used this traditional stamp and offered in another official seal. So that is in a kind of personal post stamp, but the organization that was chaired by the famous person Yulia Goldenberg, and she was the head of the organization. I forgot the name of this organization, but in any case, she's the head of the charitable foundation, and they've ordered this special stamp from the post office. They developed the design, and it was produced. This stamp, it could be used, but it was ordered privately, so it's a great rarity, because they've only produced a couple of envelopes with this stamp. So it's a unique artifact, because you can hardly find like anything like that. And this is a couple of additional kind of private stamps, privately ordered stamps. So these are the final Ukrainian stamp. Well, that could be not really related to the Holocaust, but still, there was a stamp dedicated to the Nobel Prize winner of 1981, Roland Hoffman, and he was coming from Zolochiv, that is the Lviv region, and unfortunately, some of his relatives were killed during the Holocaust, but thanks to the Polish and Ukrainian people, others of his relatives were saved or rescued during the Holocaust. He was gratitude to that, and he visited Ukraine. He's still alive, and he supports Ukraine. So that's a person who survived the Holocaust. And some more examples. You can see the envelopes of the first day. That's with his own signature. And just a couple of more examples. This is the envelopes with the stamps produced by the people. So they're also kind of legitimate. They were made by individuals. There's some more examples dedicated to the topic of Holocaust, Baba Yar. This is something that I'm showing to you. It's all parts of my personal collection. And the final part of my speech, with your permission, this is something that I wanted to cover some other countries. I gave you the link to North America, and Israel. That's another part, and I would really need at least an hour to talk about Israel. I will show you just some pieces. I would like to show you more in Ukraine so that you would be more aware of the stamps produced in Ukraine, but also to show you some of the European countries. In some cases, there's only one stamp dedicated to the Holocaust, because the stamps of Israel, surely it has a lot of Holocaust dedicated stamps. I would just like to briefly comment the topic of Israel, and I will run also a parallel. Well, I would say, not surprisingly, the tragedy of Holocaust is widely represented and at a high level in Israeli stamps, and there's different publications on the topic of Holocaust, but there's kind of regular stamps dedicated to Holocaust, and this is something that is not existent in Ukrainian stamps. This is something that is lacking, that Ukraine lacks, let's say, with respect to the Ukrainian famine Holodomor, because we already have 40 years of history of Ukrainian stamps, but we only had 2 stamps dedicated to the Ukrainian famine and Holodomor. So the previous stamp was published over 20 years ago, I mean, dedicated to the Holodomor, while there's annual kind of stamps dedicated to the Holocaust. In conclusion, let me show you some more examples now. This is the Italian stamp. It was published fairly recently. It was dedicated to the Italian Jews who were deported. Then to the right, this is the Bulgarian stamp. It's already the independent Bulgaria. And you can see those people who were rescuing the Bulgarian Jews. This is the stamp that is fairly recent, a stamp produced in 2021 in Moldova, and 27th of January, that's the annual date where they're marking the memory of the Holocaust. This is the stamp from Slovak Republic, also dedicated to the Holocaust. And here is something that was not existent in the Soviet Union, but what could be happening in some of the socialist companies. This is the Socialist Czech Republic. There's a whole range of stamps dedicated to the Jews, and the extreme right stamp is dedicated to the Holocaust and the concentration camps. Here's Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and others. Okay, I'm coming to the final slides. This is the Polish stamps, recent ones. And so here is more examples of the Polish marks. These are dedicated to the Holocaust and to the Jews. And this is the stamp dedicated to the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Rebellion in Warsaw Ghetto. And it is dedicated to the Jews behind the barbed wire. Just recently, they've started a series of stamps, which is something that Ukraine is also lacking. And Poland is kind of more advanced than others in terms of stamps and coins, because Poland is publishing not only these postal stamps, but also the coins dedicated to the Polish people who were rescuing Jews during the Holocaust. So here is the stamps that are being published on every year, and these are dedicated to families of Polish people who were rescuing the Jews, like the family of Ulms. These are the Israeli stamps, and I've already told you that I'm not going to show you all of the stamps, but here are the stamps dedicated to the concentration camps and the Holocaust of the most recent period. And if you take a look to the left, it was published under the umbrella of the memorial complex Yad Vashem, as it is written there. These are the German stamps, the stamps of the Western German dedicated to the concentration camps. Well, it's not maybe directly related to the Holocaust, but German stamps, this is a separate thing. There's not too many of them, but they can, here's the stamp from Luxembourg, and here is also a number of other stamps, 2 from Netherlands, 1 from German, that's dedicated to Anne Frank. This is a series of stamps that I didn't know about, and I've just recently got them. This is the recent stamp from Portugal. There was a whole series of stamps dedicated to the Holocaust, and you can see the 5 different postal marks with 5 different individuals. It's a series of postal stamps, and there's another one. Maybe someone can give me contact details from Costa Rica, but just recently it was published. I learned about this stamp in Costa Rica. I couldn't get that. I would really like to have it in my collection, but so far I couldn't get it. So that is the most recent stamps in Costa Rica. And then the very final thing that I wanted to mention, this is the envelopes dedicated to the topic of Holocaust. That is the Lithuanian example without the steel. That's the start of 1990s. That is the envelope sealed in Warsaw, stamped with Warsaw. So these are the stamps that were already used in the envelope. That's the first day stamps that were kind of stamped on the first day. This is the Polish people rescuing the Jews, and I wanted to kind of say just a couple of words about the North America. This is the stamp from Canada, and just this the very final stamp, just one Canadian stamp. That's the most illustrative one from Canada that I wanted to mention. It's dedicated to the Holocaust, 2001. This is the first day envelope. This is several Israeli stamps. That's the Israeli. That's the stamp from the Slovak Republic. It's separate description. And now one more Polish family is rescuing Jews, and this is the very final part. There's just a couple of them that's dedicated to the Bobinger, but it's not the Ukrainian but Israeli one. So someone produced that. It's not from the Israeli post office, and there's an official stamp placed in different languages, in Hebrew, in English, and in Russian, and in Arabic as well. It appeared in the beginning of 20s. So thank you for your attention. That's from me. Thank you, Dali.
to expect English. I think I will switch to Ukrainian right now because it's understandable that most of you speak Ukrainian. Я перейду на українську. І
Okay, so let me start by saying that that I'm going to say, this is going to be my personal position, and it's not the official position of the Memorial Museum of Holocaust of the United States. So
views and the conclusions that I will draw right now, it's my own personal opinion and do not represent the views of opposition of United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Я хочу ще раз подякувати організаторам.
Once again, I would like to express words of gratitude to the organizers of this conference for having this special round table on the Holocaust in Ukraine. I believe this is yet another important proof or evidence from the academicians pointing that the history of the Holocaust in Ukraine, it's a part of the history of Ukraine, and Ukrainian researchers, they clearly understand that, they recognize that, they accept that, they research that, and they're working in this direction.
The first two speakers, Yuriy Skira and Petro Dolhanov, are working directly with the history of Holocaust, and they also are focused on totally different topics, but the topics which have regional dimension. This is a kind of micro story. Sorry, something emerged on my screen. So they deal with microhistory, and in fact, they are not only researchers of Holocaust, they are the people who are involved in different public events. They deal actively with public history, and the people who are directly are the teachers, officially or not officially. They are training future staff of teachers and researchers. As for Yuriy, out of his speech, I really advise you to pay your attention to that, to his recent book, that is Solid, Footwear Factory. This book can be already bought. I do recommend it to you. I had an opportunity to get acquainted with his text beforehand. And maybe my question to Yuriy will be the repetition of those conversations and discussions which we had before. Yuriy, in his report and his speech, also drove attention to that, attention to the importance of the involvement of Jewish sources for the studies of saving Jews. The issue of saving Jews, which in Ukraine is rather in the focus of the attention during the recent years. We can even state that to some extent, and again, it's not only about the research system of Yuriy, but altogether in the whole context, they even pay more attention to that. They give certain advantages to this topic, officially and not that officially. Why is it important for us to involve Jewish statements and, in fact, history to comprehensively show the issue of saving the Jews, because he is speaking not only about the everyday life and the issues which the Jews faced, and also the people who were hiding them, and the Jews from Lviv who had to hide, but about complicated relations, which in some moments were the reflection of that complicated societal fabric. There were certain moments of daily anti-Semitism, there were different points. But of course, what's important in our case is the outcome and the risks these people had to take. The research of Petro Dolhanov has several dimensions, practical research ones, incredibly important ones. It's not just delving deeper into the micro-history of how it took place, how genocide of local Jewish community was taking place in Ratne city, but it shows the process. It shows the process and illustrates the mechanism of involvement of different actors in this process. in this genocidal, violent process. It's not only about Germans, it's not only in some area at some point of time, in some groups of Ukrainians, but economic aspect as well of genocide, I mean. Why is that important? And again, for the proper understanding of complicated nature and multi-layer nature of the history of Holocaust, how it really took place. That is important for the understanding how violence is involving different layers of population, including civilians. What's their motivation and what choice are people making in this situation? This is a very complicated social platform, and the sphere, the understanding of the complicated nature without judgments, without the attitude, but the understanding what choice was taken by the people in the situation is very important for the future generations of the researchers and for the understanding of certain processes which we face today, how people are responding to certain processes, how certain ideological and maybe even the lack of ideological preconditions in their life impacts their decisions. I interrupted Petro, but let me mention that he also had a scientific popular book, Ratne, Life and Death of Jewish Community. It is available in Ukrainian, and if you ask where we can find it, I can suspect that it may be found at the website of the Ukrainian Center on Holocaust Studies, or you can also directly get to Petro. Two next speakers, Serhiy Hirik and Vitaly Chernoivanenko, are focusing on the the modern period, and all the topics they're working with are beyond my expertise. I would even say that these are the topics which are still more about modern, contemporary memory policy in the institutional meaning. That is about Vitaly Chernoivanenko's speech. Who produces those stamps? Who is defining their design? Which events are celebrated by them? So this is very often is the reflection of the public policy of this or that state. So this is a totally different period, which is rather interesting as well. The speech of Serhiy Hirik is interesting and sometimes even irritating and nasty for me. Personally, for me, it is nasty because of different reasons. So it is very hard to delve deeper into such sources and to try to understand the sources, the roots, ideological roots of this. Well, I don't know whether I should name them subculture. I'm not that sure that they are a subculture, these bands. This is just a kind of a sphere. I have several questions. How disseminated are those ideas? Where do those bands manifest their ideas? Whether their songs are really available. Well, maybe they are available online and they are disseminated more online, but still I'm interested in the official public sphere. How does Russian society, for instance, can consume, how does the Russian community, society, consume this kind of a content? And also, finally, I'd like to add that the topic of Holocaust and the topic of distortion of Holocaust during the last 2-3 years and before that was manipulated and is being manipulated by different political and non-political and neighboring countries, let me say it like that. I, on the one hand, is happy that in Ukraine, the studies of Holocaust are being developed in spite of financial or any other reasons, even the lack of institutional support of this sphere of research. But when we look at the landscape, the academic landscape, we can see that the researchers are working on diverse topics, and not only pleasant and nice topics like saving Jews, but also complicated topics connected with collaborationism, anti-Semitism, sexual violence in different corners of Ukraine. beyond Kyiv, beyond Lviv city, in Uzhhorod, in Kharkiv, in Kherson region, in Odessa, we have colleagues who are doing that. So we may say that this is the development, the foundation and development of the studies of Holocaust in Ukraine. And here it seems to me that we need to collaborate, we need to cooperate with each other. When we are teaching certain topics devoted to that, we shouldn't be afraid of this topic. The history of Holocaust is not just the history of murders. This is a very complicated, a complex topic which includes diverse topics. The speech of Petro just illustrates that, because it's important for us to understand what was the prehistory of relations between the Ukrainians and the Jews, or I would say other ethnic communities which used to live and are living in Ukraine today. That is a very complicated topic as approach, but without the understanding of life, the coexistence, our previous experience, we wouldn't understand what was lost. And finally, let me add that the Holocaust studies in the Western academic science gave a push for the development of the genocide studies. In the context of the Ukrainian history, it is important for us to understand about the developments of this sphere, because I will not speak about the obvious. The history of Ukraine is filled with lots of examples of political violence, famine, and deportations, forced deportations. The understanding of the processes, the methodology, the ideological substantiation, that is all rather important as an issue, and they are beyond just positivist approach to these stories. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your attention, and I do apologize that I took your time. 1 minute more than I should have. So please, dear colleagues, you have 14 minutes more to answer. We decided to begin the next round table at 12:45. So please, you can see the message in the chat. Svetlana, thank you so much. Those are the wonderful news. So maybe my colleagues could start. Let's start with Yuriy or Petro. Would you like to add anything or answer my questions, please?
Пане Петро, може ви хочете почати?
Petro, would you like to start? Thank you. Okay, let me try. As for, well, first of all, thank you, Natalya, for your comment, which is rather important, and for the attention to my research. Yes, this is the cycle, the series of publications which were issued. They are accessible at the website of the Ukrainian Center of Holocaust Studies. I was trying to emphasize that in the beginning. At the website of the Ukrainian Center of Holocaust Studies, they are available in the e-format. They are not paperback publications about the Holocaust in those little volume settlements. And of course, this is the attempt to recreate the process, to show how Holocaust and genocide were taking place. And there's a lot about motivation there, about how different actors, including local actors and district departments, we didn't even know who formed them. They were not researched in many localities. Who was included in the police? Who was the part of the local or district community? How they were structured, which units they had, and what they were dealing during the Nazi occupation. Those were the questions which led to many myths. And also, they were just named collaborants, which allowed Russian propaganda to instrumentalize it and to use it. Because, in fact, those are very complicated dilemmas and motivations which can be traced. If we look at this micro level, we can see that the role of ideology is really exaggerated. Because there were people. They spoke about, in fact, Ukrainian Rebellion Army or the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, but who was forming the units of the auxiliary police or helping the police units? Then they were mobilized as they had combat experience. But first, in the beginning, they may have not have anything in common with them. On the other hand, there were people who had nationalist beliefs and helped the Jews. They were the people who had something to do to Bandera underground and helped the Jews. Andriy Usach found such an example. Thanks to him, Yad Vashem appointed this, in fact, this name or this position for Andriy Tuchin, because he used to be in Bandera underground, but he saved Jews. So the role of anti-Semitism leads to many discussions in Holocaust studies. Anti-Semitism was kind of a part of traditional, in fact, interworld which exists during the World War II. Anti-Semitic cliches can be found in the majority of the residents, including the ones who saved Jews. The question is how that impacted the behavior of the people during these times. Sometimes it influenced, sometimes it did not. The role of the economic factor, which is very important and very ambivalent, because the concept of greed is eternal. This is something which characterized the behavior of the person in different epochs and contexts. And during the Holocaust, in Ratne, the material use could both incentivize people to help the Jews because they saved them for money, and it can be described in the publication as well, and vice versa. On the opposite, they could give them out, and these cases are described as well. Or an interesting case: the majority of people were motivated not to help Jews. They were suspended from that because of the fear of punishment, of being killed. And the economic factor rather often was not working because the punishment could take place for looting, but still the looting took place. That's an interesting issue. I have my own hypothesis, but this is the totally different topic, why it happened like that. The issue of security of the relatives, and also dodging from mobilization in Germany could also play an important role. Why people were volunteers coming and working in the police. It gave certain privileges. So it can be found in propaganda as collaborationism. I don't like this word, and I was trying not to use it at all, because there is the national process of collaborationism. It really took place, but people were differently impacting. Someone helped kill the Jews, but they could simultaneously save other Jews, or they could swap those roles during different periods of time. And the issue is what motivated the neighbors to their behavior. That's a very complicated question, because there are lots of discussions in the historiography looking at the example of Poland, the research of Jan Grobowski, the latest research is even without end, the series of articles by the locations, how Holocaust was developed, and how the people were becoming traitors at the local level. If we look in the Ukrainian perspective and we compare Ukrainian statements with Jewish statements, and we compare different perspectives, we will have a different picture. The dynamics was more complicated, and many people did not only betray, they were in fact helping in the different way to show where to go, where the safe place is. They even gave out food. If we mean the lengthy hiding of the Jews for several months, that's a unique type of behavior. It was not that frequent. But episodic help was taking place much more frequently, and I can find that in the statements of the Jews, and we can make the conclusion out of those statements that the local population was really anti-Semitic. Or when you read about other cases, you can make the opposite conclusion. This is the example when history is not deductive. It does not use the deductive method. We cannot help mistaking. This is such inductive science that we can debate about that for a long time. But it's important to understand that, including the perspective of the modern information wars, because the story of the history of Holocaust is instrumentalized in the aggressor country as well. And what they tell there does not comply with any canons of the science when they publish some of the propaganda materials. Thank you. We can also add that Sol Fidland, who was the researcher of Holocaust and studied German society, he came to the same conclusions. When he looked at the usual Germans, their behavioral models were unpredictable sometimes. So we need to understand the context of the situation and so on and so forth. So again, Jewish statements, a comprehensive approach is very important. Maybe Serhiy would like to add anything?
Микрофон.
Okay, just to make sure you switch on the microphone. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Natalya. Indeed. Going back to your question about the representation of those masterpieces that I've mentioned, it's very hard to analyze them. As I was writing this statement, I sort of decided to cut at least half of that. I had to listen a lot of things, and at a certain point, as you're listening to that, you start to kind of move away from the text, and instead of listening, you're trying to pick up certain motives or scripts that are being repeated, that are being mentioned over and over again, and it allows you not to perceive them emotionally, but instead you would kind of decompose them or deconstruct them into separate ones, because you won't be able to listen to them in any other manner, because these are horrible texts and horrible songs. As for the representation, I would say if you take the mid of 2010, now those bands were kind of pretty public. They were performing publicly. The texts were pretty kind of outrageous, I would say. And Russian bands were playing in Russia. They were participating in the festivals abroad. And they weren't those kind of Nazi or neo-Nazi festivals. They were called like right-wing festivals or something like that. In some cases, the Ukrainian bands might be participating in those festivals as well. And this band, I mean, the band called Kalavrat, starting from 2010, it started to change its rhetoric when many of their texts were considered extremist by the decision of the Russian courts. They started to use different words, different wording to make them softer, but still the people who'd be deeply engaged in this topic, they would still be aware of what was mentioned in those texts. So the old albums were released no more, and they were released under the label NS Records in Russia. And back in 2000s, they were playing together with a number of Swedish, German, and Serbian bands. They had some joint albums. Then they started to play, in some closed locations, some bars and pubs, and the information about their performance were kind of distributed through some messengers. Because that sort of music got prosecuted. So they started performing kind of behind the closed doors, so to say. And among those bands that I've mentioned, there's only the TNF band that still exists, and it could be performing still, but only in a very short audience. As for the Kolovrat, it stopped all of its activity, although it wasn't disbanded officially. Denis Gerasimov, well, is no longer a musician after being called to FSB a couple of times, but the songs that were considered extremist, they are removed or deleted from the music that could be listened openly in the Kolovrat, or sorry, in the Vkontakte. And primarily, you can kind of try to find them on the internet, but they were most popular in the period from 2000 till 2012. Then they're becoming less and less popular. Even still, this band Kolovrat is still being listened, and it's being popular not only among the neo-Nazis, not only among the representatives or those who have right-wing representatives. Then another band, which is a very interesting example of the exploitation, with a lot of ironic text, and it's much more popular. They perform openly, even though a lot of their songs were considered extremist according to the court decisions. I thank Serhiy, I thank to all the colleagues. Oh, Vitaly, I guess, wants to say something. Unfortunately, it's already like 12:45. I would like to add, but still, the topic of Serhiy is very difficult, and it's difficult for me as well would be for me to listen to something like that. But since we are colleagues for many years, and when Serhiy will be listening to songs like that, he usually kind of retells me. So I got used to that, and I came up with the sort of immunity. So just to add a bit, Natalya, I would like to agree with you. Well, due to the lack of time, I can't be mentioning about this. If we have more time, I would cover this topic. As you've mentioned, there's several directions, like an artist component, and then there's another important direction as the policy of memory of the state policy. And why is it happening so to some of the countries like Ukraine? Okay, we've seen that. There's the topic of Holocaust, which has been represented in many cases. Like Slovak Republic, they also have one. Poland have one, but then Lithuania. Well, yes, we can talk about Lithuanian anti-Semitism, but there's stamps over the past 30 years. There's a stamp dedicated to Lithuanian Jews. There's a stamp dedicated to the Vilnius synagogue. Then there's a stamp dedicated to Karim, to many more. So there's a big list of them, but there's no stamp dedicated to Holocaust, and there's a question why. So you would need to analyze those things and then to talk about those things. Let's have a separate meeting and have a discussion on that. I thank to all the colleagues. But look, the most important thing that we have to underline to the students, that we do not promote any of the ideas, we teach them how to think critically. So the Holocaust, it's not about the policy of memory. The history of Holocaust is the history of Holocaust and the topics subordinated to that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful and really important panel. I'll stop the recording of this panel and then begin the next one for the roundtable.